Not too long ago, about 100 years back in time, Santa Claus summoned all the master elves to an important meeting. Arvo, the head of the post elves, came in with a pile of letters the size of a reindeer calf, all of them asking about life at Korvatuntri. Prying strangers asking all kinds of questions would have disturbed things at Korvatuntri. So they decided to write and draw a book to be printed for everyone to read and see. The master elves turned to Scumble, the head of the artist elves, who was asked to be the author. Chirping in the new year. After the Christmas rush, the folk at Korvatuntri like to rest and sleep in. Santa Claus' house is under a thick cover of snow, but before long the ovens are lit and the snow is shoveled from the paths. For a moment, the rays of the sun light up the top of the fell. The days gradually grow longer, and Santa Claus takes out his notebook. It's time to start thinking of Christmas again. Living high atop a stump. The folks in Elf Village awake to the call of a jay, which works much better than Nudge, the elf whose job it is to get the sleepyheads out of bed. Before long, wisps of smoke curl up into the sky as breakfast porridge is cooked in all the houses. Hundreds of red-capped helpers live in Santa Claus' big yard. The mill elves like the places behind the grain sacks, whereas many sauna elves live in the dark under the sauna benches. And the dwarf elves, well, they're a completely different story. The dwarf elves live under the spruces. Now, nobody knows exactly how many dwarf elves there are. They don't live in Elf Village. Instead, they've built their tiny homes where they can't be seen, under the trunks of fallen trees, in crevices in the rocks, or under the floors of saunas or storehouses. Their small size is a great advantage. The dwarf elves are the best mushroom experts in all of Korvatuntri. They can easily spot a good edible mushroom and check underneath to see if it's been eaten by worms, and then they cut it down with a small saw. Who's afraid of the old sauna elf? It's pitch dark in the old smoke sauna at Korvatuntri. Whisk, the eldest of the sauna elves, knows that good dry alder is the best firewood. The water for the sauna is carried in from a spring. Now the elf children learn from an early age that you mustn't whistle or fight in the sauna. But despite this, there can be serious water fights in the sauna, and that's when Whisk, in his striped shirt, orders everyone down from the benches and sends them out to the woods to practice making whisks from birch branches. The skilled eyes and deft hands of the carpenter elves. The carpenter elves are also skilled sculptors who often stay in their workshops until late at night. The wood store at Korvatuntri contains a great number of age-old boards and planks. There you can sometimes hear the elves arguing in their high-pitched voices, trying to saw the best bits of knotless wood for themselves. But when Master Elf Jot turns up, the arguments end there and then. The old folk of Christmas Valley. Not all the old folk are master elves, but all the master elves are very old. They are ingenious, resourceful, grey-bearded old characters. Master Elf Jot and his helpers plan and design most of the houses and buildings at Korvatuntri. And with his yardstick, Jot keeps an eye on the work of the carpenter elves. Fife leads the elf orchestra and chorus. He is interested in wind instruments, bark horns, reeds, and willow whistles. The dwarf elves play grass whistles, and Fife has added a few tame starlings to the choir. Master Scrub is responsible for cleaning, managing the laundry, and many other chores. The cleaners in their stock caps and with their brushes, soap and dusting rags carry out their assigned duties in no time at all. Schoolmaster Jaunt's beady-eyed pupils in their red caps don't sit in a classroom. You can find them in the woods or in a boat on the river. Jaunt takes them outdoors to teach them about plants and animals, even the lowly water flea. They sometimes sit and study the elves' primer high up on a branch in a tree. Glyph, the writer elf, always has a quill, a notebook, and an ink bottle at hand. He's the poet of Korvatuntri, who will take pen to paper whenever a poem is needed for someone's birthday, or if the Korvatuntri players need a new, action-packed play. Here's Glyph's poem about Suds, the sauna elf, at the circus. Stripes and streaks, big and small, sauna elf Suds loves them all. A circus zebra in striped array made Suds cry out in dismay. Can't you see those stripes are paint? The other elves call back. Get out of here, they certainly ain't. Theatre director Hokum can make rope appear out of thin air. In fact, he's a first-rate liar, at least on stage. But he's noticed that the audience has a good time when they're really being fed a line. 7 red caps. At the bend of Reindeer Brook, beyond the big woods, is the home of the 7 elf brothers. They are, from the eldest to the youngest, Jonathan, Thomas, Arthur, Simeon, Timothy, Lawrence and Edward. They're not Korvatuntri elves, but Santa Claus' nearest neighbours. The elf brothers are the friends and guardians of animals and nature. They even understand the language of animals. The disappearing concert hall. At first, the dwarf elves made a castle of snow, very pretty, but ever so small. And then the other elves began to add rooms and towers to it. Finally, all the Korvatuntri elves took part in the work, and they built a white winter palace with a large snowman standing next to it. And in the spring, it'll all melt and disappear. A late birthday party. Everyone at Korvatuntri knows that Santa Claus was born on Christmas Eve. But on a busy day like that, there's not much time to celebrate, and that's why the Christmas party is always held after New Year's. There's mead and blueberry juice, cinnamon rolls and honey crumble pastry, and dancing in the living room, even on the table. When evening falls, the sauna elves give Santa Claus a proper sauna bath, washing him with tar soap and rubbing his skin with juniper berry oil. Spiced fish soup and mushroom pasties are served at the feast. Korvatuntri, here we come. Here's Snicker, the surprise guest of Santa Claus' birthday party, coming into land. Grey Owl Hoot has brought this curly-bearded gnome back to Lapland all the way from France. The return trip took almost 10 years. The little boy who loved jam. Somewhere far away in Lapland is a mighty stone pillar called the Pivot of the World. Santa Claus' home once stood at its foot. At least once every 10 years, Santa Claus journeys out to the pillar. Back home, he keeps a few things from his childhood in a cupboard. A drawing of a boy gorging himself on jam, a faded Raggedy Ann doll, and a broken chamber pot. There's also a pair of linen trapdoor pants and a small sledge that once served as a cradle. Long, long ago, Santa Claus was rocked to sleep in it. You can always watch the northern lights. Behind Korvatunturi, there's a lookout tower made of logs where Master Elf Cog often sits and admires the northern lights. Nobody really knows when the northern light can be seen. People in Lapland used to believe that the northern lights begin to shine when a giant fox swipes the side of the fell with its bushy tail. The sparks that it lets off light the fires in the heavens. Folks at Korvatunturi believe that it's good luck to see a shooting star and the northern lights at the same time. Lots of snow, but little to eat. It's an ordinary winter. Then one day there's a big snowstorm, followed by more the next day. One more snowfall, and there'll be more snow around than anyone can remember. The squirrels' stores of food are somewhere deep under the snowdrifts, and they can't find them. Santa Claus neighbours, the wise elf brothers, have noticed this, and they give the squirrels cones and acorns from their own caches. Spring is on its way, and Gold River is thawing. Finally, spring arrives at Korvatunturi. The days grow longer, and the ice thaws in Gold River. Postman Elf Frank stops at the arch bridge to admire 3 smews flying overhead, and a swan stepping on the edge of the ice, all of which are definite signs of spring. But spring also brings the gold rush to Korvatunturi. When the waters of the river have warmed a little bit, dozens of busy gold washers appear on the banks. The nuggets from the river are melted and minted into small coins to buy all things necessary from the south. Holidaying on Summer Island. Every year in July, Santa Claus takes leave of Lapland, Korvatunturi and the elves. He goes south on his summer holiday to central Finland. Waiting for him at a place called Suomiainen Island are a log cabin, a food cellar, a fishing rod, a sauna and a lake to swim in. He's dreamed of this all through the cold winter. The very first evening down south, he sits on a rock by the shore, fishing for perch, with a delicious scent wafting through the air. Mrs. Claus making pancakes in the cabin. The Island of Lazy Elves. Flowing slowly right behind Korvatunturi is Reindeer Brook, leading to Heat Pond. In the middle of the pond is round Elf Island, overgrown with lots of trees. The elves spend their time on the island playing, making crafts or sleeping. The summer is the best time on the island, where the elves can go boating, canoeing, fishing or swimming around the island. In the winter, a hole is cut into the ice and the elves can take a dip without even thinking twice about it. Picking berries with a bear. In the autumn, the cellars at Korvatunturi have to be filled with food for the winter, and the kitchen elves gather everything from cabbage heads to juniper berries. Sometimes a bear can turn up at the same berry patch, but in the autumn the bears are well fed and heavy, and the elves can fill their baskets undisturbed. And then they can ask the raven for directions to another cloudberry marsh. At Korvatunturi, time is kept with the grandfather clock and the almanac. The first snows are a reminder of winter and Christmas approaching. Santa Claus' grandfather clock is set to wake everyone up at 6. And if Santa Claus doesn't get up, Mrs. Claus will send one of the kitchen elves to tickle his feet. Master Cog and his technician gnomes look after the old grandfather clock. Cog has come to know the stars and the phases of the moon, and every year he draws up an almanac for the folks at Korvatunturi, marking the passage of the days and weeks, and the birthdays of the elves and the reindeer. The sun goes into hiding. When Christmas approaches, Korvatunturi is cloaked in a soft blue twilight, and finally the sun no longer rises above the horizon. Only the moon and the stars give their light, and the candles made by Master Elf Scrub's assistants since the previous summer. Making toys is a serious business. Sounds of sawing, bang and hammer come from the toy workshop. An army of elves is busy sewing, planing, gluing, painting and packing. Dolls, teddy bears and toboggans are always well-liked gifts, but the design office is always coming up with new surprises like trains or monkeys on bicycles. One of the gnomes has fallen asleep inside a gift package and was wrapped up and put in a big gift sack. The sack was already on the sledge when a tiny voice was heard screaming and the gnome was saved. There's nothing like a reindeer ride. Korvatunturi would not be the real home of Santa Claus without reindeer. From an early age, the elves learned to get along with these antlered beasts of burden, to harness and drive them, and naturally to milk them too. When Christmas draws near, good care is taken of the reindeer and sledges and harnesses. Everything must be ready for Christmas Eve. The reindeer love to eat lichen, and they look for it under the snow. And reindeer milk is very good to drink, and it's also made into tasty white cheese. Tons of wishes. Korvatunturi's mail follows Postmaster Zip's schedules. As autumn draws on, the mailbags grow bigger and bigger. Strong reindeer, large sledges and many able-bodied elves are needed to carry the mail. Sometimes the elves like to race down the side of the fell with the reindeers and the sledges. With the approach of Christmas, Santa Claus is almost buried under the high piles of mail. But even though he reads the wishes of children until late at night, most of the correspondence has to be left to the clerk elves. Santa Claus goes off into the woods. After reading thousands of letters and dictating as many replies to the clerk elves, Santa Claus takes his well-tarred skis and makes his way to the backwoods beyond Korvatunturi to take a look at Christmas time in the forest. Master Scrub's squads of elves put candles under the trees, and the spruces are dressed as Christmas trees. Santa Claus skis at a relaxed pace under the snowy boughs. This is a good place to forget the workshop and the big mailbags for a moment. Santa's wandering staff. A few days before Christmas, Santa Claus and the Master Elves have one last meeting. There are many things to check before Christmas Eve. Are all the presents wrapped? How are the reindeer? Addresses and routes? The most distant presents must be sent off straight away. Santa Claus takes out his travelling gear, his long red woolen cloak and fur-lined cap that he wears only on Christmas Eve. Mrs. Claus sewed the gift sack from colourful patches. And the beard, it's washed and combed, for the most important day of the year will soon be at hand. Santa Claus gear includes a staff made from the root of a spruce, perch baked in rye bread, a leather flask containing berry juice, a travelling knife with a handle made from reindeer antler, and a compass with bone inlay. The joyous evening of a long day. In the dim morning light of Christmas Eve, the reindeer and their sledges are set on their way. Only a weak light from the clouds on the horizon is reflected on the fells. Santa Claus checks the course from his compass. The reindeer pick up speed, and they seem to be gliding over the silent valleys and frozen lakes. Candles lit for Christmas can already be seen in the windows. People have bathed in the sauna. They've had their dinner, and now they're waiting for their Christmas presents. At long last, all the presents are in the right hands. In the night, Santa Claus, the elves and the reindeer return to Korvatundri. Santa is already longing for his own soft bed. A solid meal and sound sleep for the travellers. Santa Claus is back home, in bed under a patchwork quilt. Even the reindeer are fast asleep, but the lively driver elves are still at the table. They remember strange things that happened in past years. Everyone is starting to feel sleepy. It's gradually getting colder outside. The snowy trees and houses sleep under the bright starry sky. Soon all Korvatundri will be fast asleep. Hybrid media book for kids.
When the snowflakes drifted softly to the ground, a queen sat by her window, sewing a snow-white quilt. When she looked out of the window, the wintry landscape looked like a beautiful painting framed by the black ebony window frame. As she was sewing,
the new, fabulous way to play and learn.
Welcome to the world of Poptory fairy tales. You can read along or just listen and enjoy the pictures.
Who is the fairest of them all? The mirror would always reply in the same way. You, my queen, are the fairest of them all.
Hybrid media book for kids. Turn the page when you hear this sound. The new, fabulous way to play and learn. Hybrid media book.
Also currently in this series, The Ugly Duckling, Little Red Riding Hood, The Three Little Pigs, Sleeping Beauty, and
Santa Claus. Hybrid media book for kids. The new, fabulous way to play and learn.